Zuri's fingers clutched the heavy brass handle, her knuckles turning white as she balanced a fresh stack of pressed silk linens against her chest. Rain slammed violently against the floor-to-ceiling windows of the Silicon Valley estate, mirroring the thumping ache behind her eyes. Her supervisor's harsh warning echoed in her ears. Stay invisible, finish your midnight turndown service, and do not cross into the private West Wing. Zuri had been pushing herself through back-to-back double shifts at the private compound for 4 exhausting months, ever since she relocated from Atlanta. Every single cent she earned, alongside her 4 a.m. shift at a nearby bakery and weekend commercial cleaning gigs, went directly toward her younger sister Maya's medical bills. Maya was 14, fighting a severe spinal condition that left her bound to a wheelchair. The specialized surgery that could give Maya her life back cost far more than Zuri could ever save on a maid's wage. She survived on 4 hours of sleep, lukewarm coffee, and pure, stubborn devotion to keeping Maya alive. Tonight, the estate was unsettlingly quiet. The massive property had recently been acquired by Lee Yeon, an enigmatic Korean mogul who had just moved his operations to Northern California. Whispers among the domestic staff claimed he was ruthless, dangerous, and governed by rules far darker than corporate boardroom politics. Zuri didn't care about his wealth or his reputation. Rich men were all the same to her, cold, demanding, and completely blind to the people who kept their worlds running. Tired and operating on sheer muscle memory, Zuri turned down the dimly lit hallway. Seeing a heavy mahogany door standing slightly ajar, she assumed it was the master suite requiring fresh linens. She pushed the door open and stepped inside, only for the ambient light of the city skyline to wash over a sleek, darkened office, dominated by leather, gold fixtures, and an air of unmistakable danger. Before she could step back, a shadow shifted near the desk. A striking man in a sharply tailored dark suit stepped into the light, his piercing gaze locking onto hers. Before Zuri could utter an apology, his hand reached out, catching the brass latch. The heavy deadbolt clicked into place with an ominous, echoing thud. The metallic click of the deadbolt echoed like a gunshot in the silent room. Zuri pulled the stack of linens tight against her chest, a shield against the suffocating aura of the man standing between her and the exit. Lee Yeon didn't move toward her immediately. He simply leaned back against the heavy mahogany door, his hands resting casually in his tailored trousers. His dark eyes scanned her, taking in the crisp maid's apron, her trembling hands, and the rapid rise and fall of her chest. But when his gaze met hers, he didn't find the cowering plea of someone caught trespassing. He found fire. "You're in the wrong wing," Lee Yeon said, his voice a low, smooth baritone that carried a dangerous weight. "No one enters this room without my permission, ever." "The door was unlocked," Zuri replied, her voice steadying despite the adrenaline surging through her veins. She refused to lower her eyes. "I work delivering linens. Let me out and I'll be gone." Lee Yeon tilted his head slightly, intrigued. Most people in his world, whether corporate rivals or syndicate soldiers, flinched under his silence. This woman, exhausted and wearing a domestic uniform, stood her ground. "You think it's that simple?" He took a measured step forward, the polished leather of his shoes silent on the dark marble. "In my line of work, mistakes aren't brushed off. They are calculated. Tell me who sent you." "Nobody sent me," Zuri snapped, the sheer fatigue of her double shifts boiling over into defiance. "I don't have time for whatever paranoid games you're playing. Keep your linens, fire me, do whatever you want. Just let me go back to my sister." Lee Yeon paused, his sharp eyes searching her face for any trace of deceit. He saw only fierce, unyielding devotion. He reached into his suit jacket, pulling out a slim leather folder, and tossed it on the glass desk beside them. "Zuri," he read her name tag slowly, "your file says you have a sharp mind, a spotless record, and a desperate need for resources. I don't need a maid who stumbles into my office. I need an executive assistant who sees everything, says nothing, and doesn't break under pressure. Zuri blinked, caught off guard. What? A confidential position, Lee Yeon explained, stepping aside from the door. High-stakes corporate management by day, discreet handling of my private affairs by night. The salary is 5 times what you make across all your jobs combined, with full, immediate medical coverage for Maya's surgery. Zuri's breath hitched at her sister's name on his lips. What's the catch? Lee Yeon's expression remained unreadable as he unlocked the door. Absolute loyalty. Step through this door, and you go back to working yourself to the bone. Stay, sign the contract tomorrow, and your sister walks again. The gates of the Silicon Valley compound swept open silently, swallowing the black sedan as it glided up the winding driveway. Zuri pressed her hand against the cool glass, taking in the fortress before her. The estate was a masterclass in modern architecture and absolute security. Soaring glass walls framed by dark steel, guarded by discreet men in sharp suits who moved with military precision. Moving into the resident staff quarters had been a blur, but the moment Zuri stepped into the central executive wing, the reality of her new life settled in. She was no longer carrying linens or scrubbing floors. She was managing the pulse of Lee Yeon's legitimate international holdings. Her first week was a relentless crash course. Sitting at a sleek glass desk directly outside Lee Yeon's private office, Zuri coordinated multi-million-dollar tech acquisitions, reviewed cross-border supply chain logistics, and managed high-level international correspondence. Her sharp intellect, varied for years under the weight of minimum wage survival, lit up under the challenge. She caught accounting discrepancies in European venture reports and drafted bulletproof briefing notes before Lee Yeon even asked for them. Yet working in such close proximity to Lee Yeon meant navigating a different kind of intensity. He was a demanding master of his empire, precise and unwavering, but he treated Zuri's contributions with a quiet respect that threw her off balance. Whenever he leaned over her desk to review a contract, his sleeve brushing against her shoulder, Zuri's pulse spiked. The subtle scent of dark cedar and ozone followed him, a sensory reminder of how close she stood to the fire. "You missed a clause on page 7, Lee Yeon said late one evening, his voice dropping into that low baritone as he reached across her desk to point at a document. Zuri leaned in to look, her eyes catching as her eyes drifted from the highlighted text up to his strong jawline and the intense dark eyes already watching her. For a lingering second, neither of them spoke. The hum of the estate's security systems faded into the background, replaced by a sudden, heavy charge in the air. "I corrected it on the final draft," Zuri managed, her tone clipped with a composure she didn't entirely feel. A ghost of a smirk touched Lee Yeon's lips. "Efficient as always, Miss Zuri." He straightened up, but his gaze lingered on her a moment longer than necessary before he walked back into his office. Zuri leaned back in her chair, pressing a palm to her racing heart. She reminded herself why she was here. Maya's surgery was officially scheduled next month, funded entirely by Lee Yeon's firm. She couldn't afford to get distracted by the dangerous magnetic poles of the lion whose den she now shared. The clock on Lee Yeon's office wall chimed past 2 in the morning, its low chime lost against the steady downpour against the glass. Spread across the dark mahogany table were blueprint schematics and financial portfolios for a high-stakes Silicon Valley venture. Zuri rubbed her temples, fighting off fatigue, but her eyes remained fixed on the line item expenditures. Lee Yeon sat beside her, his jacket discarded, sleeves rolled up to reveal forearm tattoos that whispered of his dark syndicate past. He didn't look like a feared mob boss in the soft lamplight. He looked human, tired, and deeply focused. "The offshore holding company is pulling funds prematurely," Zuri pointed to a discrepancy in the ledger. "If they liquidate before the merger closes, it exposes your domestic holdings to tax audits." Lee Yeon leaned in closer to examine the figures, his shoulder brushing against hers. The warmth radiating from him was a sudden contrast to the chill of the air-conditioned room. You picked up on an anomaly 3 seasoned accountants missed. His voice was barely a murmur, laced with genuine admiration. You are remarkable, Zuri. Zuri turned her head to thank him, but the breath caught in her throat. He was already looking at her. The sharp, guarded distance he usually maintained had vanished, replaced by an intensity that made her pulse thunder against her ribs. I'm just doing the job I was hired to do, she whispered, though her voice lacked its usual crisp professionalism. No, Lee Yeon said softly, his hand moving over hers where it rested on the mahogany wood. His fingers were warm, his touch surprisingly gentle as his thumb brushed light circles against her skin. Every nerve in her body screamed for the kiss that was only a fraction of an inch away. Then, the sudden sharp hum of Lee Yeon's encrypted phone vibrated against the desk, shattering the spell. Zuri pulled back sharply, gasping as if breaking through the surface of deep water. Lee Yeon's hand lingered near her face for a heartbreaking second before he slowly let it fall, his jaw tightening as he glanced at the glowing screen. The moment was gone, but as Zuri caught her breath and adjusted her papers, the heavy silence between them proved that the boundaries had already been forever crossed. The tension from the night before still hung heavily in the air as Zuri organized the morning briefing notes. But the quiet atmosphere of the executive suite shattered when the private elevator doors hissed open unannounced. A woman stepped out with the effortless grace of royalty and the sharp edge of a blade. Tailored in ivory silk suit, her gaze swept across the room before landing on Zuri. This was Soojin, daughter of the Syndicate Council's most powerful chairman and Lee Yeon's ex-fiancé. So this is the new assistant? Soojin said, her voice dripping with ice as she strolled toward Zuri's desk, her heels clicking rhythmically on the polished floor. She didn't wait for an answer. Without missing a beat, she pushed open the doors to Lee Yeon's private office. Zuri stood up to intercept, but Lee Yeon was already rising from his desk, his expression hardening into stone. Soojin, you don't have access to this floor. I have access wherever our family's interests lie, Yeon, Soojin replied smoothly, resting a manicured hand on his desk. She glided past him, placing a dark leather portfolio on the glass surface. The council has reached a decision. The board in Seoul demands stability for the Northern merger, and they won't accept your quiet exile in California without a binding alliance. Zuri caught Lee Yeon's eye through the open double doors. His jaw was set, his posture rigid, but he didn't immediately deny the woman's words. Our arrangement was severed months ago, Lee Yeon said, his voice dangerously quiet. An arrangement between us, perhaps, Soojin purred, tilting her head. But the Syndicate Council never ratified your release. The marriage contract stands, Yeon. The formal announcement is scheduled for the end of the month, back home. Unless, of course, you intend to forfeit everything you've built and invite an open war. Soojin turned, her eyes locking onto Zuri with a dismissive smirk. Make sure he reviews those documents, Maid. His entire future depends on them. With a final lingering look at Lee Yeon, Soojin swept past Zuri and stepped back into the elevator, leaving a suffocating silence in her wake. Zuri stood frozen, her chest tight, the memory of Lee Yeon's touch from hours ago suddenly feeling like a cruel illusion. She had allowed herself to believe he was different, that the soft warmth in his eyes was real. But hearing the stark reality of his world, of syndicate councils, arranged marriages, and dark alliances, shattered her fragile trust into pieces. Lee Yeon stepped out of his office, his gaze frantic as he reached toward her. Zuri, let me explain. You don't owe me an explanation, Mr. Lee, Zuri told him, her tone dropping into a cold, professional wall. She gathered her files, refusing to let him see the pain in her eyes. I'll process these documents right away. The evening air in Zuri's private quarters was stifling with unspoken words. She stood by the window, watching the rain strike the glass in relentless sheets, trying to rebuild the walls around her heart. The professional barrier was her only shield against a world where she was an outsider, temporary and expendable. A soft knock echoed through the suite, followed by the quiet turn of the handle. Lee Yeon walked in, stepping past the threshold into her personal space. He had shed his suit jacket and tie, his shirt was unbuttoned at the collar, revealing the raw fatigue etched into his features, but his dark eyes burned with an unrelenting focus as he looked at her. "I told you not to come here, Mr. Lee," Zuri said softly, keeping her distance and addressing him with cold formality. "I don't care about the title right now, Zuri," Lee Yeon said, his baritone steady as he closed the distance between them. He didn't stop until he was standing just inches away, his presence surrounding her. Zuri turned her head away, her chest tightening. Soo-jin made it very clear. You have a syndicate council, an inheritance, and an arranged marriage that secures your entire empire. I am an assistant with a sick sister. I can't afford to be collateral damage in your mob war. "Look at me," Lee Yeon commanded gently. When she hesitated, he reached out, his warm fingers softly cupping her chin to draw her eyes up to his. The heat of his touch sent a shiver through her, weakening her resolve. "The council means nothing to me," Lee Yeon confessed, his thumb tracing the soft curve of her cheek. "Soo-jin's contract was signed by men who thought they owned my future, but I left Seoul to break away from them. I am not marrying her, Lee Yeon. I will forfeit every dollar, every territory, and every title before I let them dictate my life or keep me from you." Zuri's breath hitched. "Lee Yeon, I brought you into this compound to protect your sister, but you became the only truth in a world full of lies," he murmured, his gaze dropping to her trembling lips before returning to her eyes. "I know I am a dangerous man with a past that scares you, but I am asking for your trust, not as your boss, but as a man who would tear down his own empire just to keep you safe." The icy defense Zuri had carefully constructed over the past 24 hours crumbled. In his intense, unwavering eyes, she didn't see a ruthless mafia boss or a cold billionaire. She saw a man laying his soul bare, offering her a devotion she had never dared to dream of. Slowly, Zuri leaned into his touch, her hand coming up to cover his. "I trust you," she whispered. The fragile piece Zuri had found in Lee Yeon's arms evaporated with a single shrill ring from her encrypted phone. It was barely dawn. She pulled the device from her bedside table, her heart dropping at the sight of the caller ID, Palo Alto Medical Center Security. "Ms. Zuri, this is Director Vance." The voice was tight with controlled panic. "We need to execute the extraction plan immediately. The hospital is being swarmed." "Swarmed by who?" Zuri demanded, throwing off the covers. "Press, photographers, and other men, miss. Hard men in suits pushing through the side entrances. Our security detail is holding, but you need to get here now." Zuri hung up, her hands shaking as she pulled on her clothes. A glance at her laptop screen revealed the devastating truth. Every major newsfeed, from tech blogs to international scandal sheets, was streaming a granular, grainy video. The title read, "The Gilded Maid, Secret Footage of Korean Tycoon Lee Yeon's Private Life." The footage showed her entering his private office that fateful midnight. It was Soo-jin. The angle was perfect, capturing her uniform, her face, and the flash of terrified defiance in her eyes just before the door closed. The comments section was a toxic slurry of speculation and misogyny, identifying her, exposing her history, and mentioning Maya's rare condition. Soo-jin hadn't just exposed them, she had weaponized their intimacy to paint Zuri as a social climber, and, far more dangerously, to signal Lee Yeon's weakness to his syndicate family. "They're coming for my sister," Zuri whispered, a cold, focused fury replacing her fear. She knew Lee Yeon's high-security compound was also under siege, the wrought iron gates barely holding back a tidal wave of telephoto lenses and flashing lights. If she waited for him to coordinate a full tactical extraction, it might be too late. The men Vance described weren't media. They were Soo Jin's soldiers, sent to secure a helpless 14-year-old as leverage. Zuri grabbed her go-bag, containing the emergency protocols Lee Yeon had made her memorize, including keys to a nondescript service SUV used for vendor deliveries. She navigated the compound's service tunnels by memory, her heart hammering against her ribs with every echo. She reached the underground garage, diving into the driver's seat of the unmarked SUV. Ripping the protective plastic off a specialized RFID pass, she activated the compound's remote emergency barrier override. A reinforced blast door slid upward. Zuri floored the accelerator, barreling through the service exit and into the foggy Silicon Valley dawn, leaving behind the safety of Lee Yeon's fortress to face the wolves waiting for her sister at the hospital. The rain-slicked highway blurred as Lee Yeon pushed his armored sedan to its absolute limit, his jaw set in a line of iron. By the time he tore through the hospital parking structure, Zuri was already shielding Maya's room, her body positioned like a fortress between her sister and 3 armed men in bespoke suits. Before Soo Jin's syndicate enforcers could reach for their weapons, Lee Yeon moved with lethal, practiced precision. In a swift blur of motion, he disarmed the lead operative, twisting the man's wrist until the heavy firearm clattered to the floor, and brought the second down before the third backed away into the corridor, hands raised in defeat. Standing in the doorway of Maya's room, Lee Yeon stepped in front of Zuri, turning to face the swelling crowd of reporters, television cameras, and syndicate operatives hovering in the hallway. He didn't hide his face. He didn't issue a generic corporate statement. "Look at me," Lee Yeon's voice boomed down the corridor, carrying an authority that instantly silenced the chaos. Reaching into his jacket, he pulled out his formal family signet ring and a thick stack of legal dispensations, documents bearing the seal of his family's syndicate. He held them up for every lens to capture. "I am officially relinquishing my rights to the council," Lee Yeon declared, his dark eyes fixing directly on the broadcast cameras. "I forfeit my inheritance, my titles, and every operational claim to my family's global holdings. Effective immediately, I sever all ties with the syndicate." Gasps echoed through the crowd. Operatives exchanged frantic looks, realizing the colossal shift of power occurring before their eyes. Lee Yeon turned slightly, his gaze softening as he looked back at Zuri. He reached out, his warm fingers finding hers and locking them tightly in full view of the world. The empire was gone, but as he pulled her close, he knew he had won everything that mattered. The sunlight filtering into the private recovery suite was soft and warm, a stark contrast to the storm of scandals and syndicate threats that had plagued them for months. Zuri stood by Maya's bed, smoothing her sister's hair as the girl slept soundly following her prep procedures. The quiet click of the door signaled Lee Yeon's entry. He wore a crisp white shirt with the sleeves turned up, carrying no corporate files or security briefs, just an air of steady, unshakable calm. "How is she?" he asked softly, stepping up beside Zuri and placing a comforting hand on the small of her back. "The surgical team says her vitals are perfect," Zuri whispered, looking up at him with immense gratitude. "They're prepping the operating theater tomorrow. I still can't believe how smoothly everything was arranged." Lee Yeon smiled, a rare, genuine warmth filling his dark eyes. "It should be smooth. When you own the facility, the staff tends to prioritize your requests." Zuri blinked, turning to face him fully. "What do you mean?" "The board of directors attempted to raise security concerns after the syndicate incident," Lee Yeon explained smoothly, pulling a sleek leather folder from his inner pocket. "So I bought the medical center. The entire hospital network, the research lab and its specialized spinal units now belong to an independent trust established in your sister's name. Maya will have top-tier medical care, therapy, and resources for the rest of her life, completely free of external control. Zuri's breath hitched, tears springing to her eyes as she looked at the deed documents bearing Maya's name. Lee Yeon, you sacrificed your family's empire. You didn't have to do this. I relinquished an empire built on fear to build something meaningful, Lee Yeon said, his voice lowering into that familiar, resonant baritone. Everything I have now exists to protect you and your family. Before Zuri could process the sheer weight of his gift, Lee Yeon gently took her hand, guiding her toward the floor-to-ceiling glass wall overlooking the city skyline. He turned to face her, his gaze unwavering and filled with unspoken devotion. I promised you that if you stayed, your sister would walk again. Now I want to give you a future where you never have to carry the weight of the world alone on your shoulders. Slowly, deliberately, Lee Yeon dropped down onto one knee. From his pocket, he drew a velvet box, flipping it open to reveal a brilliant diamond ring that caught the morning light like a beacon. Zuri, he murmured, his eyes locking onto hers with absolute certainty. You brought light into my dark world. Will you do me the honor of building a new legacy with me? Will you marry me? Zuri's hands trembled as a single tear slipped down her cheek. A soft, breathless laugh escaped her. Yes, she whispered, leaning down as he slipped the ring onto her finger. Yes, Lee Yeon, absolutely. 6 months later, sunlight streamed across the lush, private gardens of the estate, illuminating a scene that once felt like an impossible dream. The sharp tension of syndicate wars and midnight secrets had faded, replaced by the soft melody of a live string quartet playing under a canopy of white roses. Zuri stood near the altar, her breath catching as she watched Maya take her steps down the aisle. Her sister was upright, steady, and smiling radiantly, holding a bouquet of wild lilies, her successful surgery and grueling physical therapy officially behind her. Every step Maya took without the support of a wheelchair was a quiet triumph, a living testament to the second chance they had been given. Beside Zuri, Lee Yeon stood tailored in an immaculate dark suit, his gaze fixed entirely on his bride. The cold, formidable aura that once defined him had softened into an expression of unyielding devotion. He reached out as Zuri stepped up to join him, his fingers gently interlacing with hers, anchoring her in the moment. The ceremony was intimate, attended only by Maya, close trusted friends, and the loyal staff who had become family. There were no press cameras, no syndicate councils, and no heavy shadows of the past. As they exchanged vows, promising lifetime devotion and unwavering partnership, the weight of Zuri's past struggles, the endless double shifts, the constant fear, the heavy burden of survival, fully lifted from her shoulders. After the vows were spoken and their lips met in a deep romantic kiss that sealed their future, Lee Yeon led Zuri down the petal-strewn path to the estate terrace overlooking the valley. "Look at them," Maya laughed nearby, raising a glass of sparkling cider in a toast. "You two actually pulled off a happy ending." Lee Yeon smiled, pulling Zuri close against his side as the evening sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in deep shades of gold and amber. He rested his chin lightly against her hair, his arms wrapped securely around her waist. Turn in his arms, resting her hands against his chest, feeling the steady, strong beat of his heart. Together, they had walked through the fire, severing old empires to create a safe, vibrant world of their own, one rooted in love, freedom, and the promise of the family they were excited to build together. Thank you so much for listening to the final chapter of The Black Maid Entered the Wrong Room at Midnight. The Korean mafia boss locked the door behind her. If Zuri and Lee Yeon's story kept you on the edge of your seat, please take a quick second to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel so you never miss a new story release. I'd also love to know where you are joining us from today. Drop a comment down below letting me know what city or country you're watching from, and tell me your favorite moment from Zuri and Lee Yeon's journey. Thank you for all your amazing support. Keep dreaming big, and I'll catch you in the next story.